What's good, YouTube? This is Boxingwave, and we are back with some more content. Please, before we get started, smash the subscribe button, all right? And also smash the like button and thumbs up if you are enjoying the content that I put out. That's the greatest way you can support the channel. Subscribe it and smash it on the like button. If you can do that for me real quick, I appreciate it. I just dropped a breakdown between Tevin Farmer and Floyd Schofield. That's going to be on the undercard of Jake Paul against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. It's the only breakdown I'm doing for this week's set of fights. So check that breakdown out if you can. All right. So we're doing another video about Canelo and Crawford, and I think it's going to be a lot of videos for this fight because it's a huge fight. It's the biggest fight in boxing at this time, and you know, they've been going on a crazy press run this whole week. They've had 2 press conferences already. They've been having sit downs with podcasts. They've been doing a ton of interviews and stuff. And, you know, before we even get to the actual breakdowns of the strengths and weaknesses of both fighters, which I will be doing content on, I haven't even really began to do film study for the 2 of them, like seriously, you know. But I'm always watching both of their fights. You know, I'm always watching them, especially when I'm doing film study or some of their past opponents. Those videos will come out soon as well. All right. But they recently had a sit down with Tom Brady, who I believe is the greatest NFL quarterback of all time, and Shaquille O'Neal, who is one of the greatest basketball players of all time overall. You know, I mean, he's definitely one of the greatest centers, but he is one of the greatest basketball players in the league, in my opinion. They had a sit down with these two, and there was a point in the interview where Canelo Alvarez questions Terrence Crawford's resume, and he goes and calls Crawford and says, "Hey, name one elite fighter that you fought." Terrence Crawford responds by saying, "Well, I fought Ricky Burns, and I fought Victor Postal," and it's got the whole internet going crazy at this point because now we've gone right back to where we were when we were talking about this when Bud was leading up to fight Errol Spence, right? Because that's what all the Errol Spence fans said at that point, that Crawford didn't fight nobody. You know what I mean? He didn't have no names. He didn't have many names at 147 specifically and stuff. And no one really cared about Crawford being undisputed and being lineal champion at 135. They didn't care about that. They cared that he didn't have the resume that Spence had, at 147, which is not realistic to me because at the end of the day, Spence was a career 47 pounder. You know what I mean? So it took him to get to he got to the top quicker at 47 because he was a career 147 fighter, right? Makes sense. Crawford, on the other hand, you know, did win a title at the division, beating Jeff Horn in his first fight up there, but you know, it took him a while to unify. He didn't unify until he actually fought Spence. Spence was doing all the unification matches over there with the PBC, with the other PBC fighters, you know, fighting guys like Sean Porter and Danny Garcia and some of the other fighters he did. He fought Ugas. So he unified for those other guys and beat some of the other top contenders. Because at the time, PBC was running the welterweight division. Just they had the biggest stable of fighters over there at that time. And it changes. You know, and I'm going to talk about that here. Because, like, what is elite exactly? Like, for the people, like, and I made a tweet about this on X last night. And you got people still in my mentions arguing with each other, throwing shots at me, comparing Crawford's resume to Adrian Broner, and you know, I'm even stupid comments like, "Well, Crawford, if he had fought Teofimo Lopez, that would have been his first elite fighter." These are the comments that I have to read, you know, from people that are just whatever. Like, now, when it comes to elite, right, it's subjective. When it comes to pound for pound, it's subjective, right? I believe it is. Right? I don't think there is one official list. You have the sanctioning bodies, you have their rankings. Sometimes we question their rankings because, like, where the hell did this guy come from? Like William Skull, where the hell did he come from to even get an IBF strap or get a shot at that title? Who did he beat? You know, but whatever. The rankings are there, they're there. There's nothing we can do about that. Right? But look, When it comes to elite, the way I look at elite, and I think it's important for me having content, being on here for over a decade. When I look at elite, right, and you can change how you view it. You have elite, you have you have you have pound for pound. There's a difference in my opinion. When we say elite, I don't know if this is what Canelo means. It may not be. And I don't even think, hold on, before we get started, I don't think there's anything wrong with what Canelo said. I think anything that's going to strike a conversation between the boxing community works for their fight. It works for boxing. If we're arguing about something for a whole week, I think that's great because it helps the fight for their numbers. It just helps engagement in boxing. So regardless if I agree with him or not, I don't know what he means by elite. I know what I think of what when I say elite, I'm thinking like the top fighters in the division of any division that you're in. I don't think it means popularity, right? Because there are people who are popular that I don't think that are that good, but they're popular, right? But when it comes to elite, I'm thinking like maybe the top 10 in certain scenarios, maybe top 20 fighters in the division. But I'm thinking I'm going to stick to top 10 because I think when you say elite, I think you're in a small group of fighters that are the best fighters in the world in that weight class, right? Sometimes certain divisions are stronger than other divisions, right? I think there's more competition in other divisions than some of them. And sometimes some divisions are really strong at certain points. There's a lot of great fighters at the same division at the same time. And sometimes you've got divisions where, it's kind of weak there, like welterweight. Um, Welterweight right now is kind of weak compared to what it was 10 plus years ago. 10 plus years ago, 10 to 15 years ago, you had guys like Floyd Mayweather still boxing, Manny Pacquiao. But then you still had the other guys like Tim Bradley and Manny Pacquiao, Marquez. You had a lot of fighters around that time. And the list goes on. Then you have some of the newer guys like Keith Thurman, Sean Porter, Kell Brook that were undefeated, but they were top contenders already. You know what I mean? So you had those guys on a come up. And then you still had guys like Amir Khan. You had a lot of fighters that was there at 147 at one point. Not nearly as strong as what it is right now. Not as strong as it was back then, what it is now. You have Brian Norman, you have Mario Barrios, Boots just went up. I don't think it's nearly as strong as competitive as it was. But I think still, if you're at the very top, I think you're an elite fighter. And I'm not moving the goalposts. And I'm going to prove that in this video because I have content for years that I can go back and pull from. I'm not changing it because it's for Crawford. I think Crawford is a great fighter. Crawford has been my favorite active boxer for some time now. But I'm not changing and moving the goalposts because it's Crawford, not because he's black, not because he's American. I had defended fighters that people made the same argument for against for years that weren't American, that weren't black. So when we say elite, I believe elite is, at least 10 of the best fighters in a certain division. Because if you go to BoxRec, there are thousands of fighters actively fighting in a division, right? Thousands. And that's only including the active ones, the ones that's fought within the past year or so, right? That's the only ones they show, right? And I think BoxRec is a great tool. So if I say to you, I think 10 fighters at least in each division, depending on which division, there's at least 10 guys that I consider to be elite fighters. I'm saying 10 out of thousands of fighters that fight in that same division, right? I think that's fair. Some of them are title holders. Some of them are just top contenders. Some of them are journeymen that just haven't really had the opportunity to really prove it. But they look like elite fighters. They might beat another elite fighter. You know what I mean? Like, what is the rules when it comes to elite? It's very subjective. I don't know what Canelo, like, if Canelo asked me that, I would have been like, what's elite? What's an elite fighter to you? Is that the same thing as pound for pound? Like, what does that mean? Pound for pound, is that what it means? Because when it comes to pound for pound means you're one of the best fighters in the world in any division, right? That's the original meaning for it, right? We know that. So We have elite, which I think is some of the top 10 or so guys in each division. And I think we have pound for pound, which is some of the top 10 fighters, 20 fighters in the entire boxing sport. So when we say elite, that's what I believe elite to mean, not popularity. If you're holding a title in a division, unless you got lucky and you was a random journeyman and you fought an elite fighter and just landed a lucky punch and won the fight, you may not be elite unless you're proven to defend that title against other elite fighters. You know, those are the only scenarios where I can see a title holder not being an elite fighter. You know what I mean? Elite means you're one of the best in the world in that division. Pound for pound means you're one of the best fighters in the world, period, regardless of what division you're in. And that's a separate class above elite. With that being said, Crawford and Canelo and plenty of other fighters that's in that space have nothing but elite fighters in their resume, okay? Crawford, and the reason why I bring up the accolades for the people that's on Twitter and shit that just like to talk shit, the reason why you have to bring up the accolades, the divisions, the 4 divisions, the 2 division undisputed, is because you can't be that without fighting any elite fighters. So when Canelo asks how many elite fighters you fought, is he talking about popularity? Is he talking about pay-per-view numbers? What are we talking about here? What exactly are we talking about? Because in 2015, 2016, Victor Postal was the second best fighter at 140 at that time. This is after the years of the Danny Garcias and the Tim Bradleys, which was before his time. This is after that. Victor Postal was there, and he was at the time he had knocked out Lucas Matisse. At that time, he was one of the best fighters at 140. He was. Now I know Ricky Burns went on to pick up a belt at 140. I believe what's it called? Julius Ndongo picked up the belt, beat him, became unified himself. I know Julius Ndongo got knocked out every fight after that, after Crawford beat him. But a lot of these guys, when you go in this resume, these title holders, these top contenders were all undefeated until they fought Crawford. When Crawford beat them, they changed. It's happened in Spence. Spence was on everybody's pound for pound list, top 5 at one point. Even after the accident, beating Ugas the way that he did, beat Danny Garcia the way that he did. But once Crawford beat him, he wasn't the same. He hasn't been in a ring since. And it's not Crawford's fault if he changes these guys. So when we say accolades, you have to bring the accolades up because you got fools that's comparing Crawford's resume to Adrian Broner. And this is not a diss to Adrian Broner because Broner in his prime was a phenomenal fighter. Okay, he was a great fighter, but he fought a lot of good fighters and he lost some fights. It is what it is. You know, it is what it is. You know, he wasn't as dedicated to sport. It is what it is. That's his story. But he was a 4-division champ. But the difference between Crawford and Broner is that A, Broner wasn't lineal. B, Broner was fighting not full titles. Not all of those titles he won were full titles. You know, those WBA, tricky world, not super titles, shit, they're not full titles. He didn't unify. He didn't unify either. He wasn't undisputed. So even though he fought really good fighters, he fought elite fighters in my eyes, he doesn't have what Crawford had. Because Crawford made sure he fought. When you become undisputed, you have to fight the other best fighters in the division. You know what I'm saying? Now, it took him 2 title fights to become undisputed at 147. You know, it took him 140. He did a little bit more because it's depending on how the belts are spread out. Spence came with 3 belts. Crawford had 1. But we have to mention, and I'm not going to give him credit for fights that he didn't have. But you got to mention, Pacquiao didn't want to fight him. Keith Thurman did not want to fight him. Danny Garcia didn't want to fight him. Spence took forever to fight him. Porter really didn't want to fight him for a while neither. I mean, they were cool. You know what I'm saying? He didn't want to fight him neither. There are a long list of fighters that did not want to fight Terrence Crawford. I mean, even the guys that weren't champions that were high ranked, like Virgil Ortiz. Okay, let's talk about that. Virgil Ortiz had opportunities. The WBO put this out there. There was 2 opportunities where he could have fought Terrence Crawford. He didn't fight him neither. The list goes on and on. So Crawford had to fight whoever he could get because Terrence Crawford and Top Rank and Bob Arum just could not secure the fights for him at the time. They froze him out. They froze him out until the very, very end. You know what I'm saying? And it is what it is. But I'm not going to give him credit and give him wins that he didn't earn. But when we talk about he's not fighting elite fighters, well, these guys don't want to fight him. Even his own promoter didn't want Manny Pacquiao to fight Crawford. And Manny Pacquiao had a great relationship and was a top-ranked fighter. But he only could do what he could do. And he fought the fighters he needed to fight in order to pick up these titles. These weren't cherry picks. These are elite fighters. Would I have preferred Crawford to fight Spence right away, Porter right away, Danny right away, Thurman right away? Absolutely. But he had a different route to get to the top. Jeff Horn was an elite fighter. I know you guys don't like to look at it that way because you feel that Manny Pacquiao was robbed against him. Or you may feel like Jeff Horn didn't do shit after he lost a Bud. Again, these guys, what they were at the time that they fought, they were really good. Victor Postol was very good. He fought Crawford. He was actually good after he fought fighting Crawford. Okay? Had some tough losses, but they were really close fights. You know what I mean? Like, what are we talking about here? Jeff Horn, you might say what you want about Pacquiao. But guess what? Jeff Horn did better against Pacquiao than Thurman did against an older version of Pacquiao. And Keith Thurman was more than elite. Keith Thurman was borderline pound for pound at one point when he was unified. To me, when he was unified, I thought that he was the best welterweight after Floyd and Manny. I thought I rated him over Spence and Porter and Kell Brook or whoever else was there. Now, I don't know if he would have beat all of those guys if he had fought them. But at the end of the day, he was an elite fighter. Sean Porter was an elite fighter. Even though, yes, he lost to Spence. Yes, he was on his way out. But he was still an elite fighter. Israel Madrimov was an elite fighter. It still is right now. He's an elite fighter. There's a list. I mean, you can go down this guy's resume. There are plenty of elite fighters there. There's plenty of them. You know, and Gamboa, yes, he was an elite at that time. Absolutely. Thomas Delorme only had 1 loss at the time. Not a pound for pound guy, nowhere near that. But I'm talking about for each division at the time. Victor Postol, definitely. All right. Julius Ndongo, definitely. All right. Unified champion. All right. Jeff Horn, absolutely. All right. Jose Benavidez, no. Was he undefeated? Yes. Was he an elite? I think he was a top contender. All right. Amir Khan passed it. Velasquez, big question mark. I think he had the skills to be elite for sure. Just didn't prove it. Lost to Crawford, lost to Virgil Ortiz. Nothing wrong with that. Both of those guys I consider elite, both Virgil and Velasquez. Virgil, even though wasn't fully proven yet, I thought he was good enough to be an elite fighter at that time. Kell Brook was definitely past it. But in his prime, he was super elite. Sean Porter, elite. David Avanesian, not elite, but he is pretty close to it. He might be. Some of you might consider him. All right, but Errol Spence Jr., he's pound for pound. He's pound for pound. There's only 1 pound for pound, but he's 1. But there are elite fighters here. You know, and and Madrimal. Like, what are we doing? So these guys are no good. All these guys are no good. You can't be all these guys and just be a bum beater or a Euro beater or whatever people be saying about Crawford. You cannot be a 4 division champion, 2 division undisputed champion in the 4 belt era. There's only 3 of them: Usyk, Inoue, and Crawford. Crawford did it first. You cannot be that and be a bum beater. That's ridiculous. Again, I think Canelo saying it, there's nothing wrong with it because it helps build up the fight. It helps the boxing community go into a war with each other. I think that's necessary to build a fight. And you guys are opponents. You don't have to be nice and friendly to each other. Call each other out for whatever. You know, not many fighters are going to go into a Canelo Alvarez fight having over 65 wins in there. Canelo has 67 professional fights. That's a thing of the past now. You're not going to get any newer fighters with 60 fights on the resume. These guys hardly fight. Crawford, for having what, 40 fights, 41 fights, did well for himself. He's now going up to his 5th or 6th division, but now he's jumping a couple divisions. That's pretty damn good. And that's not pretty damn good. That's a generational great we're talking about. That's not elite. That's not just pound for pound. That's a generational great, in my opinion. So is Canelo. So when we talk about this type of thing, and the point I wanted to bring up too, I wanted to bring up Gennady Golovkin because he's the guy that I was making content on too back in the day. Okay, when he was having their run. And I remember what people used to say about him. He was just fighting guys from Kazakhstan. He's from Central Asia. People thought he was hype because he had light skin. People call him white. People dislike him because of the hype. He's a white fighter. That's what people were saying. So when he was beating the Curtis Stevens in the world and all those guys, Martin Murray's and stuff, you think those guys? The content is still up. I was making a case on how he was the best or one of the best fighters in the world. Did he have some fights that I want him to take? I would have loved him to meet Andre Ward at that catch weight of 164 or whatever and fought him. I would have loved it. He didn't do it. But there are some fighters that avoided him too. There are fighters out there that did not want to fight him. Billy Joe Saunders did not want to fight him. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. did not want to fight him. Sergio Martinez, who was the man there at some point, didn't want to fight him. Miguel Cotto did not want to fight him. There are fighters that was at 160 at some point around that time that did not want to fight him. Yes, I wanted him to fight Andre Ward. Yes, I wanted him to fight Jamal Charlo or Demetrius Andre or Aries Solani Lara and stuff. You know, there's some fighters that I wanted him to face. But I'm not mad at the fighters he did face when he fought him. He fought Danny Jacobs. He fought Canelo. I thought he clearly beat Canelo in the first fight. But as far as elite, let's go down his resume. Right? There are fighters here that, you know, I think Kasim Umar was his first test, his first real tough fight, but he won. He stopped him. All right? Gabe Rosado, Nishida, Macklin, Stevens. Not the strongest resume, not the strongest, but these guys, some of these guys were top 10 fighters at the time at 160. I think some of these guys were. Curtis Stevens was dangerous. Macklin was decent. Daniel Gill was a former champion. Marco Antonio Rubio was very dangerous. He knocked out David Lemieux years prior to that. Martin Murray was definitely a top 10 fighter, an elite fighter at 160. Guy got robbed against Sergio Martinez. Definitely a top 10 fighter. up there. Willie Monroe Jr., I wouldn't call him elite, but he had a style that could have gave a Triple G some struggle. David Lemieux, definitely an elite fighter, without a doubt. All right, Kell Brook. Let me tell you something about Kell Brook, and people won't admit it now because we're almost 10 years away from that fight. At the time that Triple G fought Kell Brook, people were saying that Kell Brook was the best fighter on his resume, even with him moving up to 2 divisions. I'm telling you, I know it sounds crazy. Now, I am telling you, there were a lot of people saying that Kell Brook was the best fighter that Triple G fought, even though he wasn't improving at 160 at all. Now, from a talent perspective, yes, I agree with that. But he was going up 2 divisions. So even though I thought he had the skills, he was small. He was smaller. And he got his face broken. So even though I thought he was better than maybe a Willie Monroe or Daniel Gill or Matthew Macklin, these guys didn't get their face broken like Kell Brook did. But Danny Jacobs, definitely the best guy at that time before fighting Canelo. And that was a hell of a fight. You know, Danny Jacobs was an elite fighter. Why? Because he had just stopped Quillen in the first round. You know what I mean? Like, are we just going to say that these guys are not elite? No, they're elite for the same reasons why I just expressed with Terence Crawford. And at this time, several fights before Canelo fought Triple G, when Canelo first moved up to 160, all right? When he first moved up to 160, and he was fighting above the division a little bit, right? Because he was fighting at a catchweight of 55. Mir Khan, Miguel Cotto, James Kirkland. Then he went up to Julio Cesar Chavez at a catchweight. And then he fought Triple G at 160. But those 155 fights are 160 fights. But he's fighting smaller guys from 54 and down. Okay? So when everybody's talking about elite and Crawford, you got to remember that Canelo, who was already elite at this time in his career, was pulling and fighting guys at catchweights right above the division. That's what Haney, Ryan, Garcia, all those guys, that's what they're doing right now. Not fighting full at 147. They might now because boots went up. But I say all of this to say that, like, when it comes to elite, we have to have more respect for these fighters and their resumes. Because Crawford, all these arguments were said about him until Spence got knocked out. You know what I mean? All of these points were made. Same thing with Triple G. He was hunting Canelo. And people were saying, well, who did he fight? I think resumes are something that they're important. Okay, when it comes to assessing a fight before a fight. But you guys are making an argument as if this guy has not accomplished anything. Terence Crawford is actually one of the best fighters that Canelo has on his resume if he is to win. He's one of the best fighters that he has there. You know what I mean? Because if you look down Canelo's resume, he just fought William Skull. He fought Edgar Berlanga before that. These are the points that I was making about him not fighting Benavidez. He fought Jaime Munguia before that. This guy came to beat Bruno Saras. Clean. Can't beat him. But that's who he fought. Who did Jaime fight? All right, Jamel Charlo went up 2 divisions to fight him. Great fighter, but he went up 2 divisions. Less accomplished than Crawford. That's skilled than Crawford, too. He fought John Ryder. You know? He fought Gennady Golovkin for a 3rd time. Much older. Way past it. Did he have to? No. Was it a confidence-boosting fight? that they can sell on pay-per-view? Yes, because he had just lost to Dimitri Bivol. That was a real challenge. And that would have been Canelo's best wins. But if we're talking on you guys' view of what's elite and what's not elite, before Gennady Golovkin fought Canelo, who did he fight? Solomon, Craig Richards, Gilbert Rivera, Joe Smith Jr., John Pascal, much older. Like Isaac Chalamba, older. Sullivan Barrera. He stopped him. He changed him, I think. Barrera wasn't the same after that. But he didn't have no big, listen, I was there when Bivol was there with Volstik and Beterbiev when these guys were, all three of them were undefeated. And I remember people saying that, Beterbiev and Volstik had better resumes than Bivol. I remember that. And guess what? Volstik got stopped by Beterbiev. Bivol went on to beat Beterbiev and become undisputed. This is what I mean about the whole resume thing. Stop calling these guys resume ass. If you're fighting elite fighters in your division, right? Let's talk about styles. The matchup. Let's talk more about that. No one wants to talk about that. They rather just chop down your resume to discourage you and take away these fighters' accomplishments because they have a stupid bias going on in their brain. They can't get away from it. Or maybe some sort of hatred towards them. It's ridiculous. So anyway, I wanted to talk a little. I know this is a longer video, but I wanted to bring up a lot of fighters in this video, and I can just keep giving you examples. I could bring up Inoue in his run at 118 and below, how everybody said that the only person he fought was Nonito Donaire, and he was freaking old. He fought an old Donaire. Rigo beat him 10 years ago. Nicholas Walter knocked him out 126. This is the things that people say towards one of the best fighters in the world. He don't have anybody. But then he goes to 122, starts at Fulton, who most of us believe is the best fighters at 122 at that time. Him and MJ, the only champs, both unified. But most people think Fulton's the best. And he beats him in his first fight, moving up. It's not beats him, he stops him, destroys him. Now, Fulton could have been drained or whatever. He was inactive a little bit. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you did what you had to do. But guys were calling this guys, and they still call him his resume trash. Why? Because he's at a lower division. Most people don't follow him. It's not many Americans down at 118 and lower. Most of the guys that's fighting at 118 and bantamweight and lower are from Asia. They're from Central or South America. They're not popular as Americans. There's not even that many British fighters over there neither. You got them. You just don't have that many of them there. So people trash the divisions. Just say you don't follow them. It's like there's some people that's not into female boxing. It's not into it. Just say you're not into it. You're not into the lower division. If you're not, that's cool. But my definition of elite is if you are one of the best in the world in a certain division, you're an elite fighter. You're an elite fighter. Because there's thousands of you. And if you're in a top 10 or 20, you're an elite fighter. You might lose tomorrow, but you might beat a champion the next day. You're an elite fighter. So elite, in my opinion, Crawford, it shouldn't even be in that conversation. And if I were him, I would answer those questions with more confidence. I would have went down a whole list. I would have been like, elite. Ricky Burns, Victor Postul, Israel Madrimov, Errol Spence, Sean Porter. I would have went down the whole list on Canelo right there in that chair. with confidence, no hesitation. That's it. I would have been like, well, I don't think you beat all the fighters you got wins against. Just to stir shit up. Because that's what people on the internet say. Usyk got Crawford at #1 in the world, and he's actively boxing. He actually has the best resume, in my opinion, because he has a third of the amount of fights that Canelo has, and he has half the amount of fights that Crawford has, and he's able to do it in way less than time than they did. And he thinks Crawford is #1. So why would I care, or why would Crawford care about what anybody's opinion on his resume is? He shouldn't. Guy that's at heavyweight, that is undisputed in 2 different divisions, in barely over 20 fights, is calling me #1. I don't need validation from you guys. Anyway, I'm gonna get out of here, man. It's a long one, but I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please subscribe to the channel, and we will be making more content on this fight as we get closer to September. But be on the lookout. We got more breakdowns on the way. Subscribe to the channel. Y'all have a good day. Peace.